Hi everyone, welcome back to my New York City kitchen. Today I'm filming part 2 of my kitchen renovation series, all about choosing compact kitchen appliances. So when it comes to small apartments and condos, it can be kind of difficult to find good quality appliances that fit within the space, that are also well designed, that fit within your price point. So today we're going to cover small kitchen brands, features to look out for, and some tips and tricks to make even the smallest space look as big and bright as possible. So let's get right into it. If you watched my previous video, then you know that it's a very small, compact box. It's a galley pass-through kitchen, roughly 6 by 7. So about 42 square feet and pretty tiny, but it does make prepping, cooking, cleaning a little bit easier because you don't have to move very far. When it came time to choosing appliances, I didn't really know what to look for. So today's video is going to help you narrow it down and hopefully give you a better head start on your research than what I was doing. So since size is a factor, I went with the smallest appliances possible. So that was a 24-inch stove, you can see it right here, and a 24-inch refrigerator. It's pretty hard to find American manufacturers for compact appliances, so I went with European brands that I had used before in previous apartments. Then the next thing to look at is what brand to go with. It's generally recommended that you get all your appliances from the same brand. Makes it a little bit more cohesive. That way all the knobs are the same. It just looks a little bit more polished and finished that way. But if you're on a budget, oftentimes you can get deals on one-off appliance. Or if you're willing to do the research on each item and get the best in class. For example, Miehle is really popular for dishwashers. Laconche is a very high-end stove that they only make stoves, that's what they specialize in. Then you might have different appliances. And in those instances, especially for something like a stove, you can go different with that because then it can be kind of the showstopper or statement piece of the kitchen. So for me, I went with different brands, and I'll tell you why. So at the time that I did the remodel, the appliances were not really important to me. They were just something I had to pick so that I could move forward with the rest of the process. I didn't cook at all. I ate, I would say, every single meal outside. I just picked appliances that I had used before in different apartments, was familiar with, and knew the quality was good. In this instance, it didn't matter that all the brands were different because I went with integrated appliances. There's a couple different terms that people refer to. Some people call it integrated, some say overlay, some say built-in, and they all have slightly different meanings. I have a blog post on it if you want to read a more in-depth guide, but essentially if you're going to hide your appliances behind cabinetry, then it doesn't really matter what brands you pick, especially when space is the most important consideration and you want to make sure you're getting the most compact appliances possible. So a kitchen with integrated appliances means you walk in and aside from the stove, you don't really know where anything else is. The dishwasher, the fridge, maybe the microwave, those are hidden behind cabinetry, paneled cabinet fronts. So why would everyone not go with integrated? I think it's pretty common in America to like the look of stainless steel appliances. For me, I'm the opposite. I think it looks much cleaner and sleeker when everything is hidden behind panels. And you see it a lot in Europe when you have really, really small kitchens. For a small space, I really do think integrated appliances are worth the cost. They give a more streamlined appearance, and they just make what is even a tiny, tiny space look bigger and look more clean and simple and streamlined. And when every inch matters, they provide better traffic flow and less congestion, especially in a narrow space like this is. So you might be wondering, how does just sticking a panel on the front of an appliance lead to better traffic flow and less congestion? So integrated appliances are actually different dimensions from your standard appliance. For example, the average American refrigerator is 30 to 35 inches in depth. So from the backsplash to the door handle of a fridge, it's about 35 inches. And usually that means it sticks out a little bit from the cabinets, they're not all in one line. Cabinets will end here, and then the fridge will end maybe 1 to 3 inches out. And when a space is really narrow, that can make a difference, honestly. So with integrated appliances, they're meant to stay hidden and stay in line with the cabinet, so the depth is narrower. And they also tend to be narrower in the width. And what that means is typically for a regular fridge, you would open it up and the freezer would be on top. It's usually a nice big box for a regular refrigerator, and then your fridge on the bottom. Whereas an integrated fridge, typically has a smaller fridge on the top, and then a smaller, like say 2/3 fridge on the top, and then 1/3 on the bottom is a freezer, and it's usually 3 freezer drawers to maximize the height of the space. It's definitely a small freezer. I can show you the inside of mine, and you really can't fit much in there. Counter depth refrigerators tend to be taller, and since your average older New York City apartment does have relatively high ceilings, it's a great use of a narrow space. Go up. The one thing to keep in mind is if you go with an integrated counter depth refrigerator, you do need to factor in some extra space for the compressor. So usually that's on top and on the bottom, and that helps provide airflow from I think it goes top to bottom, or maybe bottom to top, but basically you need extra vents on the top and the bottom, and you need a little bit of space in the back of the appliance for airflow, so you have to consider that in mind for the planned dimensions. So now I thought I would quickly talk about the appliances I chose and some considerations when you're looking at what appliances you want. So I went with a 24-inch Bertazzoni stove. It's a Italian manufacturer. So a 24-inch stove has 4 burners and a smaller oven. For comparison, a 48-inch stove will have 1.5 ovens, and a 60-inch stove, which is like a nice, maybe like a Rolls Royce of stoves. It's nice and wide. It fits 2 side-by-side ovens. I want to say that's like relatively rare in a New York City, apartment. So why did I go with the Bertazzoni? I've cooked with it before in an old apartment. It's a high quality stove at a good price point. So then the other thing to look at is whether you want a gas or an electric stove. For me, I prefer cooking on a gas stovetop. Electric is typically considered safer, and if you have a really, really small apartment, then electric cooktops are often smaller than a standalone slide-in gas stove. In terms of the ovens, it's better, I think, if you're a baker, to have an electric oven. I think they're more even. I think the ideal setup is to have like a gas cooktop and a electric oven for baking. I've had this stove for a couple years now, and I think it's totally doable to cook for probably up to 4 people on a 24-inch stove. On the other hand, I have a 24-inch refrigerator, and it is very, very small. I would recommend, if you have the space, to go up to a full-size refrigerator. So the one that I have is a 24-inch Liebherr refrigerator. Liebherr is a German manufacturer. They are probably, I want to say, maybe the only manufacturer that makes fridges so narrow, and again, you see them in quite a lot of the high-rise apartment buildings in New York City. I think it's a great fridge, but there's just not much you can put in it. As for appliances that I don't have a dishwasher. So up until this apartment, I had lived in places both with and without a dishwasher, and I never really used it. So I didn't think it was that big of a deal to not have one. It's pretty common in New York to not have a dishwasher, actually. Now I would do differently. I would definitely put one in. I think it's so much more convenient, especially when you're having people over. Just, nobody likes to clean, right? Instead, I wanted to install a washer and a dryer. Having laundry in New York City is also pretty rare. It depends on the building. Even if you have the space for it, some buildings won't allow it. I actually get a lot of questions about it just because it's not really common to have in New York City. So I wrote a whole post about what it's like and what you have to consider when you put in a washer and dryer. So you can check the post link in the description box if you are curious. So for the washer and dryer, I went with Bosch appliances. Again, it was just something I had used in a previous apartment. Bosch and Miehle are probably the 2 most common brands that make compact washer dryers. Compact meaning 24-inch. I believe the standard, I want to say it's 36-inch, but so the 24-inch washer and dryer, they are not your typical American large washer dryer. They do have to do smaller, more frequent loads. The dryer especially is a ventless dryer, so it doesn't dry your clothes as quickly as you would expect from a normal dryer. I don't really use the dryer that often. I prefer to air dry my clothes. It's better for making your clothes last. It's also better for the environment. And anytime I do need to dry something, the building laundry room has those large commercial dryers that can fit like extra large towels and sheets and things like that, so don't really need a dryer. The washer is really handy to have though. Definitely do not regret putting that in. So I guess in hindsight, if I were to do it over, I'd take out the dryer and put in a dishwasher instead. Since it's a small space, we got the narrowest sink possible, but
what I think we did do well was we got a really deep sink, so that way you can still, like, you can put plants in it to water your plants, or like a really giant stove pot, like stock pot or something. So definitely recommend getting a really nice deep sink. I think that was really handy. Just make sure, I remember we had an issue installing the sink because the plumbing line was too high, because when it's a really deep sink the plumbing needs to be a little bit lower to accommodate it, and the sink affects your countertop and backsplash. So generally you want to make sure that everything is progressing like in line, because one issue can cause delays for all the other issues. It wasn't a big deal, but just something to keep in mind. Ventilation. So this is another thing I had no idea that I needed to think about. And basically with old pre-war buildings in New York City, it's generally, as a rule, you're not allowed to vent to the exterior. What that means is for the stove, the exhaust fan for the hood, you cannot vent it outside, and usually you want to do that because that way all the cooking smells and the oils can, you know, get out of the apartment. Unfortunately for pre-war buildings you can't do that, so it's basically just a circular fan that like blows all the cooking smells around, which is not the most effective, but it's better than nothing. And you know, as long as you open the windows, you air it out, it's fine. You definitely want a good smoke alarm, because generally anytime you're cooking like steak or burgers, it is going to set off the fire alarm. It's going to get really smoky. If you live in a newer condo building though, like the new buildings, they often are planned for like a more, you know, for this century, and so they typically do have exterior ventilation. The ventilation also matters for the dryer. So again, I talked about this more in depth in the blog post, which you can find linked below, but basically an electric dryer is what I have, because you can't vent it outside. So it's not as powerful of a dryer as it would be if you could vent and get the water out.
So I hope this video was helpful and gave you some ideas for what to consider when you're choosing your own compact appliances. Let me know what brands you're looking at, what you're thinking of doing, how your space is turning out. I'd love to see it. And stay tuned, I'm going to have more interiors and New York City videos coming, so make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching. Bye.